call the ceasefire was like, okay, question my Christianity, people would still be up.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, but I was just going to say that I think when I first came across presuppositionism, it was Matt Slick, right? And you come across Matt Slick, and you think, oh, this guy's a bit of an idiot, but you just see him as a guy that engages people, right? And then I come across Darth Dawkins, and I'm like, oh, this is like the same stuff Matt Slick used to do. And then I kind of start listening, and he's like, but wait a minute, Matt Slick wasn't a complete cunt to people. This guy's a complete cunt to people. And it's just like, it's a complete difference.
Matt Slick is not stupid. Like, he's not a black belt, but Matt Slick is definitely not. So look, the difference between Matt Bell and Matt Slick and Darth Dawkins, and I'll put like Saichen Bruncato and Darth Dawkins, is that Matt Bell and Matt Slick, as much as they won't like to, they will meet you on equal ground. They will answer your questions. They will begrudgingly flip the script and actually go where you lead them sometimes, because that's charitable, right? People like Saichen and Darth are just vicious, rude, and they will take every inch you give them, and they will demand more. They are completely joyless, and they have one-track mind. They have no room for any enjoyment or camaraderie. They're there for one reason, and they are completely one-tracked.
Yeah, I agree pretty much.
Well, Pogan, I'll debate you right now if you'd like on Christianity or on theism, if you'd like.
Do you have
I'm sorry, you cut out. What'd you say?
Do you have a claim?
I have a claim that there exists a higher power or higher entities, otherly entities that exude something that could be said to be akin to that which is supernatural.
Is it higher?
In virtue of what?
In virtue of evidencing it, witnessing them.
Do you think that this higher power is justified through means other than rationally? I mean, Mike, there's a lot of feedback coming through you, Mike. Because I would make the argument that any higher power of that nature, assuming we're assigning it the properties, we would expect it to be assigned, consistent with something like the Christian God, or perhaps Allah, or anything along those lines. I would say the justification of that entity begs the question, because the only way you're going to be able to justify it is either A, through some revelatory text such as the Bible, or B, through your own sense perception. But both of those just rationally beg the question. And I don't think begging the question
if I state
rational.
Okay, well, I'll say that rationality is based communally, and that one of the entities was witnessed communally. It was witnessed by more than one individual. I'll also go so far, in addition to my claim, to say that by witnessing this, it paralleled something akin to Mark in the Bible, seeing something at the end, seeing something that was overwhelmingly convincing to him, that convinced him that this whole history with Christ was true and correct. But okay, so that's my pushback on the rational. Your argument about rational.
I'd like to respond.
Okay.
Yeah. The issue with trying to justify the existence of a deity through communal observation is that essentially what you've done is you've still appealed to sense perception, which in my mind would be further begging the question. But you've also now incorporated the opinions of other people as if that somehow constitutes rationality, when in actuality that is simply an appeal to popularity, right? Basically, basically what would be the case is if every human being on the earth were to see God come down from the heavens tomorrow, right? Just as a hypothetical, that would still not constitute rational justification of God, because it would be justified through means outside of rationality, right? We assume our sense perception to be valid for many purposes, such as, induction, scientific experimentation, etc. But that does not mean that your sense perception necessarily constitutes a rational argument in favor of the existence of anything.
Right, because excuse me, Declan, because evidencing error by waving one's hand would also not be rational by that same accord worldwide,
sure.
right?
Well, 1 second. Coming to a conclusion through actually true premises and an actually true conclusion is not the same thing as saying, I justify this evidentially. Because if you're saying you justify it evidentially, that's analogous to saying you have a probabilistic assertion that it is true, right? The evidence seems to suggest that this is the case, but unless you are able to justify that through rational means, all we can say is that there is evidence in favor of X conclusion. And I would argue that that's not the same as saying a deity definitely exists.
Well, I'm saying that the evidence witnessed communally, it does make that claim. For you to then take my claim, which is meaning if I speak of this class of entities that are supernatural, right? Each one occurring once and ephemerally, meaning that it's not controllable, therefore it's not testable. The oneness, the once occurrence of each of these entities not being controlled, the probability, as you say, to put a probability scaling to each of these entities makes no sense. Meaning it's impossible. So if if I'm left, meaning my experience is not left vapid though, simply because what I'm witnessing is one-time events.
Sure.
Right, and so I'm only left to the experiences that I have.
Okay, that's analogous to just saying that all you can trust is your sense perception. But that wasn't. You didn't claim.
No, that's not the same.
1 second, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Your claim was that you could establish the existence of a higher power, which we're treating as a deity, since you've also been describing it in that. You didn't say, I have evidential cause to believe in a deity, because I wouldn't contest that. Certainly, there are many positions which have evidence in favor of them, which makes it reasonable to believe in that position, but that is not the same as saying you can justify the absolute existence of that which must exist absolutely through rational means. I also wanted to ask you a quick question. If this entity, or I suppose deity, is justified in the sense that it is that which is the absolute authority, right? It follows from that it would be self-verifying. That is necessary for the existence of any entity of this kind. It must be self-verifying. This is known as epistemic circuit. The problem with this is that when you do that, you're essentially saying the premise and the conclusion are true because they're the same. And that would make, at least in my mind, that would make the position unfalsifiable. So when you deal with something that's unfalsifiable, and you say there's evidence to show that it exists, there can't be evidence for something which is unfalsifiable. So that's arguably incoherent, Lucky, right? If you were to say your position's unfalsifiable, and then I have evidence to assume that it's true, that's an incoherent thing to say.
Okay, well, regarding the first claim, or your first position on there, first, in the instance of communally witnessing, once again, I'm not stating the word my senses, I'm explaining the term senses, generally, right? And by deferring away from my justification to communal justification, that is a domain of justification, and it is a justification that points to a class of entities. From witnessing a class of entities, I make an induction. I'm making an induction, right? At this point, now I have more than one to work with, that because there is this class, that is an indicator to me, right, that there is something beyond, right? Now, the something beyond seems to point to something that others might claim as, or like biblical Christians might point to and say, that's an indicator of the God that I believe in. In the second case that you're talking about, the circularity, self. How did you phrase it? Circularity.
It would be unfalsifiable, which means there's no evidence that could show it is true.
Right. And in this case, I would refer to my third instance. Let me know whether or not I come in clear here, because there's some background noise that came in here, right?
Well, before you start that, I'd like to respond to what you said relating to my. Yeah, it's bad, but the problem I'm having with your response to my first claim is that you're essentially just trying to say, still the experiences of an agent, or perhaps the experiences of numerous agents, can give cause to believe in some proposition. Say, X is an existent entity, X is a deity, right? And that's justified in virtue of me seeing it and the people.
Mm-hmm.
Assume the deity to be existent.
Sorry.
That is fine. But the problem is, when you try to assert something existing objectively, that is to say, external, and you use sense perception as a justification of the question begging, is involved with with how you're going to go about justifying your sense perception as an object, because at the most reducible level of your defense, you're going to be appealing to some starting foundation or axiom, which you're not going to be able to justify outside of circular.
That's fine, Token.
Otherwise, one second. I can't. I need to be able to finish.
I was talking to you. I'm going to respond.
Sure, that's fine. The problem is, when you do that, you're not going to be able to justify your most reducible foundation outside of circular means. Otherwise, you're just going to be perpetual. And when you do that circularly, that is very much begging the question, because your conclusion would essentially be identical to your premise. You know, for instance, my sense perception is valid.
No, I know what you're saying.
Okay, so that is why he would be begging the question if he were to say it definitely exists.
Okay.
If Lucky just wants to say he assumes it to exist, I'm perfectly fine.
Okay,
Well,
now here's the problem. The problem is that the counterclaim that you're making is a trivially true claim, because ultimately position that's uttered by a cognizer within this realm, if there's other realms that exist, ultimately beg the question, right? This is not true just of the claim being purported, right? If I say that some sun come up this morning, and you say, yeah, and I said, how do you know? And you say your sense perception, and I can give that same exact argument and say, well, it just begs the question.
Well, I already addressed it.
Hold on. In order for you to hold that holds any water whatsoever, you ultimately have to write off every single experience, including the experience of the proposition that you just uttered, which would render your argument self-defeating.
I disagree in virtue of the. Let's put it this way, right? Yes, every worldview or position which depends upon some objective assertion is inevitably going to engage in circularity, which begs the question. But the problem is, he's not saying that he assumes it to be true, which I already said I would be fine with, right? So long as everybody says, I assume something to be true based on my axioms or my fundamental starting
You asked for my claim.
One second, that's perfectly fine. But if somebody were to say, the existence of that which is the ultimate authority is certain, it objectively exists in an external capacity, and you justify that through means of appealing to some circular starting position, that is invalid. You must say you assume it to be. How is that? Declan, I'm not saying he can't say he assumes it to be true. I'm saying that based on that starting position, to state an actual truth would be invalid in virtue of being.
And I'm telling you, if you want to bite that bullet, right? It's equally true, regardless of whether it's an inductive and a deductive. And we've already agreed that he said it was inductive. But regardless, the point here is that if you want to bite that bullet, you also have to bite the bullet that your argument's self-defeating, given that you can't accept that or you would have to accept that you have no reason to believe the proposition that you just uttered or its conclusion.
That's not a meaningful. I'm not trying to state an actual truth, right? I could simply defend that in virtue. I assume based on my criteria.
Hogan, do you believe that I'm stating an actual truth? You told me what's the claim. I gave you a claim.
It implied that it was an actual truth. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you're picking up something that I'm not saying. Meaning, I'm not arguing. I mean, I'll argue the veracity of it. I'll argue that this happened because it did. If you want to reduce me down to the idea of whether or not I'm going to trust my senses, then I appeal once again to everybody else what it means to trust one's senses, which I believe Declan is bringing you to the ropes with, right? Meaning, you're at some base level, you're correct in that I have to appeal to my own senses. That's fine, right? The reason I mention this was communal is so that you don't bring it to a psychological realm, right? Because then you're talking about group psychology, and at that point, then I'll make the analogy to everybody evidencing wind by waving their hand towards their face. Right?
Well, I mean, if you're not making a deductive argument in favor of that which would exist as an ultimate authority, right? If you're just saying, in virtue of a communal experience of I infer, or perhaps I inductively reason that the entity exists, I mean, that's fine, but that's a pretty, that's essentially a meaningless claim. You can infer
it's only,
through those means, you could say, I assume it to be valid, and that would technically be a correct.
Right. Now, look, I came in here, I jumped in because you seemed as if you're presenting this overwhelming atheist kind of holding of the ground that theists are full of shit, and that Christians are full of shit. Hang on, why don't I finish? Why don't I finish for a moment? Right, hang on. Right. No, this is what I'm saying, Bogan. What I'm saying is that I can be a theist, and I can say I am like a Christian because of this theism, right? And I still qualify in some capacity, right? And your claim is you're now assuming something about me which is incorrect, that I'm appealing to an ultimate authority. Like, my theism doesn't necessarily land on the idea of an ultimate authority. So you're now prescribing something to theism based on your interaction with an orthodoxy, an assumption.
So let's figure out your claim. Your claim essentially is, I inductively reason that some higher entity exists in virtue of a communal experience of that entity in which I participated as well. The problem is, if you just
incorrect.
Okay, so you need
Incorrect.
To your mind. There's a lot
Incorrect.
Look, if you're just trying to justify your belief in something through a communal experience, I don't understand what the value of that is. But yes, you would technically be correct. The problem is, unless you make a deductive argument, unless you show me that I have some conclusive reason to arrive at the existence of this entity, just making an inductive argument of that nature is sort of vacuous. There's no reason for me to believe you when you say, this entity exists. All I can do is say, you have a belief that this entity exists in virtue of some justification. In this case, the communal.
Right. Now, I mentioned this.
He's providing you with evidence.
Okay.
Look, he's not saying that it's deductive, right? But he's providing you evidence. So the probability.
That's not relevant.
Yeah, it is, because the probability scale goes up for his proposition. Now, in order for the probability scale to go back down, by definition, you would have to provide a counter-argument as to why his evidence should not be admitted. Now, you attempted to do that by saying that he was begging the question, but I provided a counter-argument to your counter-argument.
No, that's Declan.
Well,
you're misunderstanding.
But before you guys go on, let me just phrase this again, right? Just so you understand, right? I'm talking about a series of witnessing what I call supernatural entities, right? Now that's one class over here, right? Now within that class, there was a witnessing with a community, right? A community of two, and that, I believe that's also that could help your case. But nonetheless, a community on witnessing one of these things. So in the first case, I'm not left with anything to work with. In the second case, where I'm talking about a class of entities, right, that I will say are supernatural, right, or beyond the scientific realm, and they're once occurring, each ephemeral, non-controllable entities. This isn't a shtick. This isn't a shtick.
Assuming something, if that's what you're going to stick to, all I can say.
No, I know. All you can say. Let's just go ahead and give in. Cave in with all you can say.
I can just simply say there is no reason for you to come to the conclusion, based on this communal experience you have, that that entity is definitely what you assume it to be. Then it's meaningless. He's just making one second. He's just making an assumption based on some sensory experience he had. And frankly, that is not meaningful when trying to convince somebody else of a position.
I'm not convincing you.
You are confusing external evidences for one to believe in a proposition and a reason why he believes in the proposition. I used to tell people all the time, they used to confuse this all the fucking time. They would say, why should I believe in God, right? When I was a Christian for 32 fucking years. And I'd say something like, well, there are many arguments for the existence of God. But that doesn't mean that was the reason why I believed in God. So the thing here with him is that he's not necessarily saying that it is the one and utter infallible deductive reason why he believes in that proposition, but rather it may be an experience that he had.
I like Declan. Declan's good to me in this. He's kicking ass.
Those are two completely different things.
Then what is the point of even stating that as a claim?
Well, the reason for cumulative cases is for inductive reasoning, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's cases for people to hold to a proposition. It goes for things like inferential statistics, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It pushes the confidence level up in a proposition. This is why people like William Lane Craig have cumulative cases. They'll start off with maybe the resurrection of Christ, or they'll start off with a reason to believe in a God, and they'll move on down in this long chain of arguments. And the thinking behind it is that if you can push the probability scale up far enough, the idea is that it's reasonable to believe in that proposition, given the long chain of arguments that one might have to believe so.
Okay, but that's meaningless then. If you're simply arguing that you justify the existence of some supernatural entity in virtue of a communal experience you had of the entity, sure, that may constitute in some capacity evidence for the end, but that is not a compelling reason for anyone to conclude that the entity definitely exists. All Lucky can say is that I have reason to assume that it exists. He cannot say, I have reason to conclude that it definitely exists. Because if he makes that claim, right, he's going to have to provide some argument outside of him just experiencing this entity himself or communally with some other people. So what the defense of him claiming that this entity exists is, right? And he responds with, well, I had some communal sensory experience of that does not provide me a compelling rational reason to conclude that the entity exists. All I can say, Lucky may have some justified reason in his mind of concluding that the entity, but this is what?
Again, you're confusing.
Declan, I don't think there's a confusion here. I'm stating very simply that he may have something that constitutes evidence for the existence of the, but all he is capable of doing is coming to a probabilistic or assumptive conclusion. He cannot reasonably or rationally prove the existence of.
He's not trying to.
What is a revelation?
He's not trying to prove it. That's the.
If he's just trying to make a probabilistic assertion based on his.
That's what an inductive claim is.
Right. Okay.
A revelation. What is it? It's a type of communication, right? A divine communication. So if God is unfalsifiable, then that can't be evidence for God because it's a posterior.
Do you understand, Pope?
There's no argument.
He gave you an argument.
There's an accumulative argument, as he mentioned.
So 1 second, Lucky. 1 second. His argument is, I have evidence of this entity in virtue of a communal sensory experience.
Do your job. What you would have to do is provide a counter-argument and say, that's not us. Now, you tried to do that, and I provided a counter-argument.
No, you misunderstand. I was operating with assumed he was trying to make some conclusion for the existence of the entity. But if he's simply saying he wants a response to this, that means he can assumptively conclude that the entity exists. That is an entirely different situation altogether.
Right. Well, I tried to bring up the class of cases when we moved to that portion of the argument. But you're right. At some point, based on this evidencing of these classes of entities, I make an assumption. Now, the initial assumption is that there's something beyond the metaphysical natural realm. That's the first claim that I make, right, based on this. Now, beyond that, I do have to make a leap, an assumptive leap to a singular Godhead, right? Or I have to, at that point, make analogies or parallels to that which I've pulled an exegesis of biblical texts, right, or references that seem to align with these witnessings, right? So what I'm saying, and I really appreciate you jumping in, Declan, because you helped with certain clarities while I'm just up in the morning. Haven't had my coffee yet, but the point is that I'm making various claims, but the first claim is about witnessing of this entity communally, and once again, it appears, Pogan, that it does require. Well, let me say this: my job is to present these as arguments. It's not necessarily to convince you of these arguments. But I jumped in because of the way you were confidently assuming that atheists, saying that you were confidently assuming that there was a defeater's defeat. Okay.
Where you're going with this, right? And my issue is that the people I was referencing when I was originally speaking, they generally make deductive arguments for the existence of God. They generally make arguments consisting of premises which they attempt to justify as actually true, which is actually true in virtue of those premises. But if you're simply saying, I have some evidential reason to assume the existence of a supernatural entity, Declan is correct. All I can do at that point is try to provide you with some counter evidence as to why that may not be. But my issue is, there is nobody in the world who could come to a rational conclusion that the entity definitely exists in virtue of that argument. There's no reason to come to that conclusion, right? Science works on induction, right? Science does the exact same thing. We use evidence to justify our conclusions through experimentation. But science also doesn't make normative claims. Science doesn't say, this is conclusively the case, this is probabilistically the case.
That's where I'm coming from. Right, so I'm like that. I'm akin to science.
That's fine, right? My problem is, unless you're claiming conclusively exists, right, it's sort of just, it's almost a waste of time. Because no matter what evidence I present to you that would perhaps show the existence of the entity to be less probable than you assume it to be, ultimately, you're working from your perception, which incorporates your beliefs, which you assume to be just, and it's virtually impossible to change somebody's justified true beliefs, right? Unless they're really mad. You're just going to essentially say at the end of the day, look, I saw this event, I conclude that this is most likely some entity in virtue of a communal experience, and that's what we prescribe the entity as being, right? But in virtue of those beliefs, there's just no combating the assumption.
Well, it sounds to me like you're coming at this kind of like a native in Africa arguing against science, right? Meaning I am akin to science in this case, meaning I hold everything together based on these are the best conclusions, based on how I drill down on my own argument, based on how I can strip it and sterilize it, right? And when I come down to this stripping and sterilization of what it is I'm witnessing in the real world, I will say that what has occurred, and then my engagement with the rest of the wider community, I fall into an irrationality, which then had me philosophically assuming that rationality was a subset of irrationality on large, right? I don't want to migrate the conversation there.
Your position is definitionally irrational because you're not making any rational arguing deductive reason. What you're essentially doing is saying, I infer, or perhaps I use inductive reasoning to presume the existence of an entity in virtue of some evidence, which I also presume to be accurate. So basically, what we have here are a chain of assumptions. We don't have anything that could constitute conclusive proof of jack or shit. We just have assumptions, and you're correct. That is very much the way science operates. Science uses observation and inductive reasoning to come to probabilistic conclusions. But for you to say inductive reasoning of this nature justifies the absolute existence of anything, that's my problem. And you may or may not have made, but like I said earlier, all I can do is provide you with evidence which would potentially lower the probability of this being true.
Which you haven't done.
At which point you're simply going to respond by saying that either A, the evidence, or B, my beliefs are justified true beliefs that are not malleable. So it's very much a waste of time to engage in inductive argument. That's why when I said I was comfortable engaging Christians, I said that in virtue of them most of the time making deductive arguments that come to conclusions they believe in virtue of the arguments are actually.
Well, I come to conclusions, but my point is that you did not qualify everything to that ground prior to my jumping in. Once again, I jumped in. So in other words, you're only comfortable arguing with a certain class of theists, and that class is Christians, and of that class, they must have they must be rational agents, and they must make these claims in this way. Therefore, because you only want to have an interlocutor that's rational, and that makes sense. And I don't think that I'm entirely irrational. I believe I've moved into that, and my argumentation has had to co-opt something that is irrational because of the nature of the witnessing, because of the nature of the evidencing. And then, like Mark, right, in the Bible, here the parallels of Revelation, thank you, Godless, for mentioning this, is that is kind of a story or a tale within the text that Christians often can refer to. And so the incidences that I claim are revelatory, right? And so I think I'm like Christians in this manner very much. That's why when people ask me, am I a Christian? I don't say, I say I'm not a Christian, meaning that I share some attributes of Christianity, then I can go there, and I also try to retain kind of a method of argumentation that retains it.
I understand what you're saying.
But my point is that you haven't defeated me as a theist here. You haven't annihilated or done anything. You haven't budged anything in terms of a debate with a theist. You've just disclaimed me.
You're making an inductive argument in virtue of evidence, right? And I pointed out to you a few minutes ago that sent you with some evidence against your conclusion, or perhaps I was to invalidate the legitimacy of your evidence. All you're going to appeal to at that point is some belief which you hold to be a justified truth, right? This is the problem with engaging people who make inductive arguments of this kind. Unless you're making a deductive argument for the conclusive existence of whatever entity you are stating exists, it's just a waste of time. There's no reason for anyone to agree with your conclusion unless they happen to find the evidence satisfactory. And I'm not interested in people who solely make inductive arguments in favor of the existence of some and then act like therefore their position is rational. It's definitionally irrational. It's an a rational position to hold. If it was rational, you would have a deductive, conclusive argument for the existence of the entity which you assume to exist. But if you're operating solely on assumptions, like I've said multiple times, it's just irrational. Not irrational, mind you, irrational.
Right, well, and that's really great that you make that distinction. But, I imagine that is the whole realm of the atheist argumentation, is to make certain that all positions of the theist are necessarily contained within said rational structure, rational form. I even argue that there's other epistemological frameworks than justified true belief. Right, but that's migrating the argument away from this argument, right? So essentially, all you're doing is you're telling me the veracity of my argumentation with you so far, and you're not really working with it. You're just calling it a waste of time, and
so we're calling it irrational.
Right, you're but in lieu of it being irrational, it's not worth your time. Well, once again, so all I'm stating, right, all I guess I'm carving out here is a position for theists that you haven't defeated, and you haven't defeated them, and so you can confidently walk away realizing that your position in public argumentation did not suffice to defame a class of theist.
That's ridiculous.
That's
like
ridiculous?
Saying that, unless you show the process of science to be invalid, right, you can't object to any science. I said quite clearly that your position was irrational. The conclusion that you've come to isn't really a conclusion at all, because you're just making assumptions, and you assume the conclusion to be. If you're saying you haven't destroyed theism, right, and then you describe theism as just being an irrational inductive position, it's almost a cop out, right? You generally, for that which you assert exists conclusively, you make a deductive argument. If you make an inductive argument and then you simply say, I assume the conclusion to be true in virtue, that's just irrational. There's no point engaging with that unless I feel like providing you with counter evidence or invalidating the evidence that you claim supports.
I just want to make sure I understand this. You're saying that then no theist would give evidences for his position?
Well, most of the time it would be kind of pointless in virtue of their own position. But let's say that wasn't the case, right? Let's say they did make evidence and then came to Lucky's position, which is that he assumes the conclusion. That's fine, so long as they acknowledge that, number one, it is an irrational position to hold, and number two, there is no logical reason for anyone else to assume that their conclusion, or not even assume, no logical reason for anyone else to come to the conclusion that it's just irrational.
So I want to make sure I understand this again. The idea is that you believe that there is zero amount of evidence that can be provided for your position to change with regard to his position.
Sorry, Sam?
There is zero amount of evidence that would be able to be provided. Let me state it this way. No matter how much evidence is given, you think there would be zero reason to believe in God.
Belief in God entails that God conclusively exists. Because that which is the that which is the ultimate authority either exists or does not exist. If you simply have a belief, right, if you have an induction that comes to some probabilistic assertion that God exists, right, yeah, I could certainly agree with some evidence that may or may not point in that direction, but that does not mean I'm going to come to the conclusion that God exists, right? Inductive reasoning, by definition, cannot operate on a true conclusion.
That's why we have beliefs.
Right, but
that's why we have.
Thank you, Declan. Meaning that could be applied to your interaction with your belief in your computer or any other object, because that, once again, it'll come down to the reliability of the senses. Meaning your You're moving away my argument on an argument that could be applied to every object within your universe, Pogan.
Well, look, I've responded to Declan's question, right? I said, certainly, there could be some evidence that probabilistically true that a conclusion may be valid, right? But again, this entire argument exists outside of rationale. You're dealing with inductive reasoning, which, at the end of the day, cannot make any conclusion which is asserted as definitely true or definitely false.
That's really true.
Well, I don't understand what it means to try and argue evidentially for something which, I'm assuming you adopt, a common theistic position, is unfalsifiable. Right?
No, all I'm saying is that for you to keep restating, all you're doing is just restating that induction is induction, and no one is arguing that it is. But also, it seems that you're arguing that in virtue of the fact that induction is being argued for, that gives you a lesser reason, or no reason rather, to believe in the proposition adhered to. And if that's the case, you can just fucking throw science right out the goddamn window.
No, I don't throw science out the window, because understand that science doesn't make normative claims. Science
things follow from
One second. Science makes probabilistic assertions based on evidence and hypothesis. The problem I'm having is that we now come into the situation where Lucky, presumably, is trying to argue evidentially for that which could be easily shown to be unfalsifiable. And I said this very early in the conversation. Even if you were to make an inductive evidential argument in favor of the existence of an entity of this kind, you're going to be coming head-to-head with the issue that it is unfalsifiable, which means there can't possibly be evidence in virtue of this thing's existence. So no matter how you slice it, you're going to come into some extremely problematic situation that undermines the... It doesn't...
Okay, well, let's deal with the unfalsifiable claim after we get through this holistic argumentation, because I just find this absolutely fascinating. Do you think that conclusions that are come to from the system of science are necessarily useless?
Yeah, again.
Do you think the conclusions that come from the process of science are necessary?
No.
Okay, but you realize that the conclusions that are come to by people who follow science, not necessarily who are scientists, are come to those by way of a probabilistic system.
I don't know how long to...
Did I say I rejected probabilistic assertions?
Because you said that ultimately the argument that Lucky was giving was a useless or inductive claim. And what I'm telling you is that...
Because the position's unfalsifiable.
No. Don't backtrack on your claim. You originally said that with the fact that he was giving a probabilistic argument, that it wasn't deductive.
Well, that's not backtracking, because I said early in the conversation that his position would constitute an unfalsifiable position.
Yeah, that's not what I'm
Why are you interrupting?
Because I feel that it's pertinent.
Right. How can you argue evidentially for that which is an unfalsifiable? That doesn't make any sense.
I'm not saying that you can. I'm not saying you can. I'm going to contest that here.
If you can't, then Lucky doesn't have.
Well, we'll deal with that in a second. First, I'm gonna deal with this issue here. We'll move on to that. Because you've said this multiple times. Every time you say it, I scream at my computer screen. But you fucking rail for science. You've made multiple claims, and ultimately, in virtue of the fact that it's not a deductive claim, that the conclusions of the arguments that are given are useless. Yet you rail for science and talk about how scientific conclusions ought to be believed in.
No,
and there's been such a special pleading.
That's ridiculous. I never said that Lucky's position was useless. I said, literally, that his position was, number one, an inductive one, which argues evidentially, and therefore nobody could come to a rational conclusion that his conclusion was correct. And number two, he's arguing for a position which is unfalsifiable, therefore he can't argue for it evidentially. So, excuse me. In virtue of that, he does not have an argument because he can't even make inductive arguments when there's no possible to provide evidence for something.
Okay, alright, so I just want to make sure I understand. Lucky's position is not ridiculous or useless in virtue of the fact that it's not deductive. I'm going to make sure I
say again
that Lucky's position is not useless, or his argument is not useless in virtue of the fact that it's inductive.
Maybe I'll start.
He doesn't have an argument.
Yes, he does. The fuck do you mean he doesn't have an argument? You just spent the
How can you argue evidentially for that which is unfalsifiable?
You agreed that it was evidential.
That doesn't mean it's not unfalsifiable. I don't understand what you're saying.
You just said that it did. You literally just contradicted yourself.
Where's the contradiction?
The contradiction is in you saying before that he had an argument that is, regardless of the reason why you say it is. Now when I say it, you don't think his argument's useless. You say he doesn't have an argument.
That's an absurd point.
Why?
Saying something is useless, right, essentially means the same thing. It's not valid. It's not an argument, right? If I say an argument is useless, right, what I'm saying is that it's not an argument. It wouldn't follow. It's not coherent or valid. He's saying he argues evidentially for something which is unfalsifiable, right? And I've said this numerous times throughout the discussion. I don't understand why you think it's the case that harping on what I said in your mind changes the fact that he doesn't have an argument.
Brogan, two things.
Hold on, Lucky. Hold on.
I just want to inject this.
Hold on 1 second, Lucky. Okay.
Good. Right, I just want to inject this. In the case of witnessing an entity alone, I'll say it's unfalsifiable. In the case where there was a community witnessing this other entity, right, I will say the falsifiability would be if the other person disclaimed it, right? Then it falsifies it. No?
Well,
Okay,
there
go
are
ahead.
many ways of falsifying the claim. The claim that it's unfalsifiable is fucking ridiculous, but I wanted to wait. I mean, there are tons of ways of falsifying a claim like that.
No, it's unfalsifiable. His premise is true, right, in virtue of the conclusion being not true in terms of actually being true. He has an assumptively true premise and an assumptively true conclusion. And because he assumes both of these things to be true in virtue of justified true evidence, right, it is unfalsifiable. Because we can assume, I suppose, that Lucky's justified true beliefs are things he holds to be act. Therefore, the most reducible position in this argument is basically Lucky saying, I have this conclusion in virtue of things I hold to be justifiably true, which is falsifiable, because I can't provide evidence for that which is unfalsifiable.
Now, first of all, an experience of what you believe to be a God is not just one. That's number one.
That's not what I said.
No, that's what follows from what you said.
No, that's not what I said, Nick.
I'm telling you, that's what follows from what you said. If you believe
then your understanding of what I said is not. Yeah, your understanding of what I said.
Excuse me. Thank you. If you believe ultimately that two premises of his argument are justified true beliefs, one of the premises of his argument is that he had the experience by definition. You have to believe that what entails from that is that his experience is justified true belief, because that's what his premise is.
No, you've completely misrepresented.
That's exactly what you said.
No,
okay.
No, it's
just you obviously do not have an ability.
Right. So you've completely misconstrued what I've said and are now presumably on things that I have never stated. So I think you're not going to be able to interrupt me again. I think I've demonstrated adequately that Lucky has multiple problems, right? The first, his rationale, his reason for concluding something, is Now, if he wants to say that it's an assumptive conclusion, that's perfectly acceptable, right? But he's saying that he can make an inductive argument that essentially operates with evidence for an unfalsifiable position, and then attack me for, I suppose, not destroying the when the position is very much unfalsifiable in virtue of what I've said, multiple times. So given that, if the position is unfalsifiable, and he argues evidentially for a position which is unfalsifiable, and he doesn't make any deductive conclusions, and he clearly doesn't assert that this entity exists, then there's no argument. There's no merit to anything that he would say. He has a reason, certainly, for assuming the premise C, and a reason for assuming the conclusion to be true. But this is essentially just operating based on, introspective assumptions,
it's
right? Psychological. I can assume there to be a pink elephant in my room, right? And then give some unfalsifiable argument for it, and then try to argue evidentially for why the pink elephant exists. That's incoherent. It's not an argument. And I've said this multiple times. Basically, at this point, Lucky, unless you're able to make a deductive argument for the existence of this entity, which you presumably believe, then you don't have an argument with respect to the existence of the entity.
This is ridiculous. Okay, I would expect more from you. I seriously would.
It's as if Pogan's trying to garner, trying to migrate me within a range. Like I'm a sheep out of his ranch.
Well, that's exactly what's going on.
He's trying to bring me in here.
Is that he's encountered multiple theists who have made claims that you've not made, and is trying to provide a preparative argument. He's trying to lump you in with those people because I don't think he has a response. In virtue of what you said, right?
I've adequately responded to what Lucky said.
First, what he said was that it was unfalsifiable because it's based on properly basic belief, right? But then I came back and said, okay, well, first of all, the premises of his argument is not a properly basic belief, and he walks the claim back and says, no, that's not what I said. I mean, if neither of the premises of his argument are properly basic beliefs, in virtue of what do you say that his argument is based on properly basic belief?
I've demonstrated this multiple times. If he makes an argument that is evidential, right, and then I provide some counter evidence or some reason as to why the evidence he assumes to be true would be, and then he says, well, I have an assumption that it is that, right? What he's doing is operating with respect to properly basic beliefs, or justified true beliefs.
What's that his argument?
Because of that, right, there is no way to argue again. He's operating on a premise which is true, and then a conclusion from that which is true. Because of this would be an unfalsifiable position.
What's that his argument?
Yeah, please stop interrupting me. This is what I've said multiple times, right? There is no way for him to argue evidentially for his position if that is the case. And that is the case because that was, that is the response of anyone who is provided with evidence that would counter the evidence or perhaps show the evidence to be.
That wasn't his response. Again, you need to stop trying to move two pieces and you're not listening to exactly what he's saying because he never said that. I understand you've encountered theists before who have said that, but since he hasn't said that and he doesn't believe that's what the basis for his argument is, then your claim that ultimately his argument is I've lost it. It's not self-validating, but unfalsifiable.
Right.
It's just false.
If he's not saying that, then what I said before which was that he wouldn't have an argument at all. He just no longer has any argument.
In virtue of what? He's giving you a probabilistic.
In virtue of him just spouting nonsense. I can say, one second. If he's not making a probabilistic assertion, right? Because if the evidence is shown to be, then there's no probability. He just has a claim which is supported in virtue of nothing. I can say there's a pink elephant in my room that I see and say that is an inductive reason to assume that the pink elephant exists. But if somebody were to provide me with some counter evidence that the pink elephant doesn't exist, the only thing I'm going to have to fall back on are my justified true beliefs. I just believe that the pink elephant exists.
He's not provided as an argument.
Let me throw in again. Yeah, there is this ongoing reduction. Like you're, Pogan, it seems as if you're now going to be the arbiter of whether or not I'm A, making an argument, B, what the grounds of the argument must be. So you're becoming the arbiter of that. You keep mentioning justified true belief. I believe I made a statement already kind of eschewing that. I don't think that you're actually interested in the position, and maybe I shouldn't even refer to it as a position per se, right? And it seems to me like I like Declan kind of picking on you here because it's a riot. You're not dealing with what I've done. You're making an assessment about everything that you've heard from me, and then you're just chalking it up to like it can't work with, therefore it's nonsense. Period.
I'm not interested in hearing you grandstand if you're not going to defend your right. I don't need you to explain to me what Declan is doing. Right? You can find it to be a riot if you want. If you're not willing to respond to what I've said about your position, then please don't interrupt me again. If you're not going to respond to what I've said, grandstand and say you enjoy Declan, defending. Right? I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know what the value in speaking to you even is at that, right? Because it seems like you've essentially just taken a step back and are now entertained by somebody attacking your position and somebody else. So if you don't have a response and you're just going to say it, right, there's no point in continuing.
I've been trying to get in on this a bit, right? But at the same.
So what is your response?
All I can assume is that you're trying to ground me out into this must necessarily be the domain of Lucky Me's argumentation, and minus that, there's no point to this. And so I think we come to an agreement there. Meaning you haven't really given me anything else to respond to with regards to this. I tried to mention multiple instances. I gave you a class of cases, right? And then I said, of that class, one of them was witnessed communally, right? So I'm trying to posit the how I delimit and categorize my evidences, right, for an argument, right? The argument is not the truth per se of the Christian God. I have not made that claim, right? You're going at certain, you're making certain assumptions. You're attempting, in lieu of me putting anything, like you want to put words in my mouth that Declan noted that I have not said, right?
I don't even think you have an argument. I don't understand, like, if you're basically just repeating what you've said at the beginning of the conversation. You responded to that, right? I asked you to respond to what I've said. I didn't ask you to restate your premises, right? And you have assumptive premises. You have an assumptive conclusion. You justify it in virtue of some evidence, in this case you having a communal experience of entity, right? And I've already explained to you why that would not be an adequate reason for anyone to come to that conclusion. And I've also demonstrated that unless you're making some normative claim or you're making a deductive argument, it's just a waste of time.
My argument was about the supernatural.
One second, I gave you very coherent, clear reasons for why it would be a waste. So I just don't understand why you think this is a response for the last 30 minutes. Surely you would have some reason to tell me that you think and your evidence is valid, right? Surely you would have some way of explaining to me that no, Pogan, it's actually perfectly justified that I come to this assumptive conclusion in virtue when I'm trying to show evidence for a position which has been demonstrated to be unfalsifiable, right? I don't know. I don't know what your response.
Okay, well, I think then we've come to an end. I really, I'm not certain. I jumped in because your confidence level towards theism was you wore it on your sleeve. You were confident that theists were full of shit. That you were arguing very confidently about the atheist position, and I think I did my job, if you will, in interjecting. Right?
Right, except you haven't made it. If your job was to not make an argument, then I suppose you could construe that as an accomplishment. But you haven't made an argument.
Well, now you can reduce down to the philosophical indexing of what an argument is in terms of premises and conclusions, or you can listen to one state a statement, a claim, make a claim, right, which I did do, and call that an argument, right? So if I claim...
A claim is not an argument.
Well, look it up. Look it up. You need me to drop it? I'm just saying, like, you've reduced the argument...
What do you think an argument is, Lucky?
Look, I already said in the philosophical indexing of what an argument is, you need premises, you need conclusions. I said, but an argument, right, a colloquial use of the word argument, is also stating a claim.
Okay.
Now, I made... Right. So in other words, you're not listening, right? So that big aha,
So your use of the word argument, when you say argument, right, when you, Pogan, I have an argument, from now on, I'll understand you saying that as the same.
No, you shouldn't conclude that, because I know both of them, right? I know both of them. And I'm saying, I'm making a claim, and my claim was, based on my experience, both personal and communal, I believe there are supernatural entities. From those supernatural entities, I am not making a deduction about a God, but I might find something that parallels that deduction. That was all I said, right? That's all I said. And
that's all you're saying, that you don't have an argument.
Tell me how I do not have an argument. I made a claim.
I've already demonstrated that essentially, by your own concession, all you've done is state you don't have an argument with respect to what you've been asserting for the last 30 or 45 minutes. You don't have an argument. I've said this multiple times. And you pretty much agreed with me when you said, Pogan, I'm making a claim. I don't understand why you would try to say that you do have an argument and then justify that by saying, oh, my mistake, Pogan, I'm using the colloquial usage of it's still not an argument. I don't particularly care what alternative definition you hold to when you say the word argument, right? Because you've understood that for the past 45 minutes, I've very much been onto what pretty much everyone would understand the word argument in these rooms. You do not have an argument.
Look, if you want me to make further claims, I'll say that even to get to the supernatural, right? Meaning to actually have an interlocutor, right? Declan's coming in to argue specific points philosophically with you about your position relative to mine, right? Now, if you wanted to have a discussion, which you hang on, Pogan, you seem to want to...
Right? But I'm not
someone keeps muting me.
You're making a deductive argument at this point. I'm just of the opinion that you're not making any argument. Because you, by your own admission, have said you're just making a claim. I can make claims all day. I could say, like I said earlier, there's a pink elephant. But if you're not making an argument, I don't understand how you've demonstrated.
I have a series of these accumulate.
There is an argument in there. It's something like this. You wanted to run it through. It's actually a deductive. This is odd, but it's like a deductive deductive claim about induction, right? So it goes something like this. It is reasonable. Here, let me type it.
So someone keeps conveniently muting me and then unmuting me almost instantaneously. Just want to note that.
I don't have that ability.
I don't think it's you.
It's because you're echoing. Declan, where are you posting?
I'll be posting in the main chat.
Yeah, I mean, and that is essentially where Declan's going. Kind of makes sense. Like from these experiences, this series of accumulating claims, I want to make a deduction towards a theocratic or a super something that is in relationship to us that we're subordinated to. I can go there, so I'm open to Declan moving it that way, right? In lieu of my stating that, it was interesting, Pogan, that you frustrated on these points. It's fine. Wind me up however you will, or say what I've done, say what I haven't done. But all I'm saying is I'm making a claim of that which is beyond metaphysical naturalism, and from there I could make further claims about how those cumulative claims and experiences indicate atheism, because that's kind of my position.
I've already demonstrated why that would. At this point, I'm just waiting for Declan. Okay, there you go. What is an in P1, Declan?
It's a deductive claim about an inductive argument, so reasonable in the context of inductive.
I need you to unpack that further. That doesn't answer me.
Reasonable would, here, let me try it back.
God makes both true and false propositions. There, I'll throw that in. That'll be unorthodox. I'll make that claim.
I understand reasonable to be synonymous with sound. I'm not sure if you would agree or disagree with that, Declan.
No.
Okay. If you disagree with that, then I don't know how to proceed further, because I don't accept your definition of reason. I would make the argument, somebody in chat said, I think it was Java, but I agree with him, right? It may be a valid argument, but it's not reasonable in my mind.
Yeah, but soundness arguments, or soundness in an argument, is applicable to both inductive and deductive arguments, right? And when I say reasonable, I'm using it in the context of inductive arguments. Or to believe in a proposition for increased confidence factor for an inductive proposition.
I just don't agree with your definition of reason.
I'm certainly not giving my A game. Well, it would be interesting to see what Pogan believes theists are composed of, meaning that all theists must have an argument for their theism, and the argument must be relegated to the lexical definitions within philosophy, which is fine. But
I
it'd be
understand
interesting.
what your question.
I'm not questioning. I'm grandstanding.
Well, you said it would be interesting to see me do something, so you're proposing that right?
See, the mere fact that you're attempting to garner agreement, a lot of the argumentation is based, a lot of truth claims and justification are based merely on agreement, and so.
Why don't you answer my question?
No, I wasn't. I'm making a statement, and from that you're assuming and pulling from that I am asking you a question, that I'm questioning something from you. I'm saying, no, here's a point of interest.
I'm asking you to answer my question.
I thought I just did. Your question
No,
was I asking, was I inferring a question of you?
You said it would be interesting to hear Bogan do X. Is that proposing?
Yeah,
yes or no?
I noted that. I made a statement. It would be interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, while we were sitting in silence, waiting, I guess, I thought I would chime up and say, I think it would be interesting.
Because I've demonstrated things to both you over the course of 45 minutes, and these objections are basically just being repeated over and over again. And I don't think I should. I don't really think I should be obligated to respond to something I've already responded.
I don't think anyone said that you were obligated to do.
Yeah. Like I said, my aim in coming in, Pogan, was to provide a class of theism, right, which I believe I fall within, right, that is upsetting to your confidences of atheism. And I'm not saying that I was entirely successful, because you've seemed to, whatever you believe my breach is, or the lack of getting me within whatever argumentative position that you like, seemed unsuccessful, and we just kind of left everything in a blob, right? And so I did my job of disrupting it, and now you're appealing to time and exhaustion, and not knowing really where to go or what to do with this. And I'm not really certain what to do with it. You're just saying I'm not making an argument.
To time and exhaustion. I said I didn't really feel like repeating things I've already. How does that lend itself to me being exhausted or out of?
Pogan, you have addressed to me questions that Declan picked up, right? Or maybe you just addressed them generally, and then Declan jumped in, right? So I'm not certain where to go here either, right? I'm just saying I think I did my job relative to my intent, relative to the context of the discussion that was occurring before I chimed in, right? You belabor the fact that this has been gone over for 45 minutes, but to be honest, I'm not even certain what it is that you desire at this point any longer. You said I'm not answering something of you, right? You apparently want me to make a certain concession and make a deductive argument, a conclusive argument that is based on the framework of justified true belief. All I could say to that was that people garner agreement.
It's incredibly frustrating to speak to you.
I'm sure. Well, welcome. Hi, how you doing?
That's in virtue of you not making an argument, but it's also in basically completely overblowing whatever I say anytime you turn on.
Okay.
I just don't think there's an argument.
I believe in a higher power. These are my reasons, and and period. Right, you're right. It's not the argument
it's
you
not
want.
an argument.
Right, it's not the argument. So I'll say that because in one case I saw something communally, I have communal justification garnered upon agreement and other people's senses. In another case, these class of entities, I will say each one had a different performative aspect or relationship to me that is phenomenological, right? And because of this series of these events occurring, I am now left to make a deduction based on this class of these evidences. That deduction does not come to a specific point. It relies on a notion, an assumption towards something that is greater and beyond, right? And so if I use a phrase or an adjective like greater and the beyond, pointing to a God, without insisting on the truth of a God, then it is left as a hold-on, or as just kind of a tentative, somewhat ambiguous position towards, orientation towards a theological ground, right? Now you take that for what it's worth, Pogan. That's my theological basis, right? So I assume that when you speak to people, you want to actually undermine their position, right? You actually want to underscore it, undermine it, and bring it closer to your domain of rationality. I assume that, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like because you want some sort of particular lexical framework within philosophical argumentation, such that I say, premise this, premise that, therefore this, and that this is true, like I cannot quite fulfill that. So you are correct that I do not have...
Well, I quote what Lucky was saying in the syllogistic form, the essence of what he's saying, so there was an argument there.
Right, and
that's why I put it in syllogistic.
Right, and then the argument came down to soundness, right? Okay, it may be true, but is it sound? No, it's not sound, but my position is not...
I agree with with what reasonable means is useless because I told him what I mean by it. So he knows what I mean by reasonable.
Right, yeah, you already conceded that, and that was my point. It's true, it's tentative, it holds, but it's not sound in that there's a lot of things that are not going to reify it. There's not a lot of things that are going to shore up.
He doesn't agree with the conclusion, but I would need a counter-argument against the conclusion.
I'm not really interested in engaging Lucky.
That's what
I know, it's fine. It's fine.
Lucky, Jobbable, I think I made a point or asked a question of you that I kind of want to hear an answer. Can I go ahead and re-ask it or restate it?
Lucky, before you do, you're going to have to fucking fix your mic, dude.
Yeah, that's preferable.
Is my mic loud? Describe my mic.
It's your mic is cutting in and out, and when you have your button pressed, we're hearing our voices through your speaker.
Okay, I'll work on that.
In response to what you said, Declan,
I thought I was engaging.
I said I wasn't engaging Lucky.
Yeah, you said me and Lucky.
No.
You think I don't listen to this?
No, I said I'm not interested in engaging Lucky any further. That's what I said.
I heard what you said.
Okay, well, clearly you didn't. I said I wasn't interested in engaging Lucky. Right? The problem is that your conclusion doesn't follow from the premise. In virtue of reasonable being a completely vacuous.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that it doesn't follow because I gave you what I mean by that definition.
Right, and I said it very clearly that I disagreed with it. Doesn't follow.
Doesn't matter if you disagree with what the word
no relation between the use of reasonable in that and the conclusion which is derived from the premise. There's no relation between those things.
What are you talking about? The same word in the...
Anyway, so says Hogan. That being said, I'm not certain actually I'm going to be able to fix my sound. I'm mentioning this to whoever views this recording. Somebody had a question for me, even though my mic may not be fixed.
We haven't. Like I said, I prefer that your mic is fixed before I talk to you, because it's going to be difficult for me. It's very stressful if your mic is that fucked up.
Yeah, I just wish I knew how it was fucked up on my end. It's not quite showing, so.
Well, it's very grainy. It cuts in and out, and it echoes. So,
Okay.
while he's fixing that,
Okay.
hey Declan, I ran the Kalam on like a white belt atheist a couple days ago, and it fucking worked. Like I'm not even good at using the Kalam. He's white belt, so that's probably why. Still, like he wasn't an idiot, but it worked, and I was kind of confused at how well it was working. Do you think the Kalam is good or what? Yeah, I think it's like airtight. I don't like that I have with the Kalam is not necessarily the Kalam itself. It's what usually comes after, which is the attempt to tie the cause of the universe to
I have no means of fixing the mic.
an embodied mind, disembodied mind, which is what we're at. See, I think the Kalam shows that it's reasonable to believe in something connected to causality, but I don't really see how Craig gets to necessary. Yeah, I agree with you completely. Yeah, he really doesn't. Like he makes a huge. Like it's one thing to say that the universe had a cause; it's another thing to say that it was caused by an interior mind. Right. That's going to require some pretty view.
That's a rough
I
rank.
guess if you want to get into what, like the nature of whatever the disembodied mind is, and then that's it. Yeah, like Craig, it's all coming back to some. He says something like, since the universe is temporal, right? It's made out of space and time. Then the thing that created would have to necessarily be spaceless and timeless, right? So that's right there. You get a couple of the elements. He's just like the foundation for the right? Which I don't know in philosophy. I need to figure out what my ideas of time are, but I don't think, or I'm not sure how one can get to an atemporal being within philosophy. I just don't think that makes sense rationally. Yeah, like that's the problem, is that you're talking about, you would be talking about a thing where you could really have, like, I like the whole idea of the material mind. I'm not even really sure how to parse out, but I am partial to my body dualism, so go figure.
Is my mic better now, maybe?
Yes, much better. Cool. So the guy who posed the question, Java Bolt, I don't know who that is. I don't know if he's a regular. I don't know, but he said this, and I'll just quote him verbatim. He said, "You haven't demonstrated your personal life is related to the supernatural." He said, "Have you come up with defenses for all natural explanation? I'm sorry, defeaters for all natural explanation?" You wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to. No. Look, imagine, for example, I said, okay, alright, let's say that you find a chew toy in your house, okay? And let's say that the chew toy has a bite in it that looks like a dog. That looks like dogs' imprints of the teeth. And let's say I walked up to you and said, well, given animals' teeth prints. It doesn't work like that.
Okay.
Right? You don't have to go through every other animal's teeth prints to know that that's a dog.
I see where you're coming from, right? I see. However, I think the point of disagreement or the point of discussion to be had here is why is it reasonable to assume that it is the supernatural?
That's a better question. That's a better.
So I'll pose that to you, Lucky. Why was it reasonable to assume, or what about it made you think it was?
That's the question Hogan should have asked.
Well, yeah, I mean, the conversation could have gone in any number of directions, I imagine. Well, a lot of people will start with a belief in the uniformity of nature, and their beliefs generally are based on consistencies of different data sets. And so I'll say that these, and then we're normatively, communally made aware or educated about what might be perceived as exceptions to those, and then given naturalistic claims such as satellites or gravity or whatnot, right? So we're given these evidences or these reasons, and the entities that I claim I've had relationship or witness of, they fall outside of the these normative claims about what a uniform world looks like, right? So that's my basis of claiming that they're supernatural, meaning they're. Thank you.
Yeah, just repeat the last part so I can get a hold of it.
I was just saying that they fell outside of that all the communal claims of what the uniformity of nature looks like, how we communally kind of agree upon what is the case in this world, right? So that's my claim of the supernatural. It falls outside of the uniformity.
So they fell out of what is communally agreed upon is the uniformity of nature.
What I'm trying to say is a lot of people will hold the term uniformity of nature, right? And then what they're pointing to are different consistencies that they witness, and that they do this witnessing publicly and communally to justify what is considered normal and what is uniform. These entities fell outside of that domain.
In what way?
Well, number one, I couldn't garner any communal verification. I didn't find anything within my data set, within my knowledge set, within my shared knowledge set, which I don't believe is, I don't believe a lot of people are too different than I am in terms of the normal data that they move through in their life and the normal claims. And so these seemed exceptional, based on how once again I witnessed the entities. They appeared to be physical but not material, emanating light.
Could you put a stop on that real quick?
Sure.
Because I think I just wanted to click correctly. Thomas, like, I think what he's saying there is that it's not just that they were speaking a different language, but that the utterance of them was not human. It seemed not human. Is that correct?
Yeah,
they
they appeared to have agency, but they were not human and they were not animal. And
gotcha.
Yeah.
You understand, Tom?
Yeah, but I'm kind of lost in the idea that nothing in the collective knowledge of humanity.
Well, imagine. This is why I stopped to clarify that. So in your collective knowledge, when you hear someone speaking Russian or Thai, you don't someone coming in and speaking Japan and don't know the language, you can understand that it's coming out of the mouth of human being. Okay, is that close lucky or am I money?
I can go there also. Meaning, I can agree with a lot of what you said, Declan. I think that's.
So the problem for me here is because I can't actually understand it in terms of like I can't imagine it. I don't know how you could validate that to me.
Right. Well, as far as validating it, that becomes the issue, right? That becomes the problem with all of this. But it is a witnessing something that I'll say is objective. It's empirical, meaning I would have called it empirical because of the communal aspect. And so I have a referent of an entity that is existing empirically. I claim it's physical, but not necessarily material. It appears to have agency. Those types of things, right? And so if anything that you could imagine that you believed was merely a product of your imagination, imagine that imagining showed up in your real world, right? You would say that was supernatural. That's my positioning, my grounding on that.
What is the conclusion you come to from the experience? Could you kind of could you give me that? I don't know what the conclusion is, so I don't know if I think it's reasonable for you to come to the conclusion.
Well, when I stripped it down, meaning because my girlfriend at the time watching this with me, she got a phone call 20 minutes later from her dad saying her granddad died. So somehow she figured what we witnessed was an apparition of her granddad, right? And I did make the association to that, but only out of the coincidence of time. Then in stripping it down, I realized the most rational thing for me to say was just a description of what my eyes witnessed, what it is I witnessed, right? And so that's where I come to from that. As far as a series, because I mentioned a class of these supernatural engagements or witnessings, right? And so now there's more than one in my history, and because there's more than one, now I'm left to believe that there's something functioning, and meaning I don't even want to tie them together, but I put them in the class of supernatural, right? I put them in the class of that which is beyond what I can refer to pragmatically in community, in general parlance. And so from that, I'm left to at least attempt to make a deduction. And at one point I did, meaning I deduced from this class, right, that it must be Christian, or not Christian per se, but it must be God, right? It must be God. It's something beyond, above and beyond that I am subject to, right? And that's, I say subject to based on the nature of the the third interaction, right? I believed I was subject to, meaning controlled by, influenced by, dominated by said entity, right? So, with all that being said, then I realized, well, if I am subject to something that is beyond me, and that there's a class of these entities, then with that I'm able to speculate and consider, right? What could that mean, right? And one of those meanings was God, a singularity, right? And based on that singularity, then I was tying, from exegesis of the Bible, I was paralleling such events to say this is evidence of a Christian God. But one of the things seemed as if it was following Muhammad, so then it was more akin to Islam at that point.
Yeah, you're moving pretty fast, right?
Yeah.
Let's not move too far so I get lost in all that you said. So all these different experiences compounded with each other, you believe necessitate a being you are subject to.
Well, what one of them I felt subject to, right? So I granted over being subject to it, and by subject, I'm not making a subject-object distinction. I'm making a subject-master distinction, right? So yes is the answer.
So it necessitates one experience. Because of that one experience, you are necessarily in a certain master distinction, subject to a being.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that it perpetuates, but I'm not going to say that it doesn't perpetuate, right? So I'm going to remain ambivalent on that. It appears that I am not always subject to it, right? But there is now kind of a new domain that I'm in of consideration that has me suspecting that something is making me subject, or it's heavily influencing me, right?
In what way are you subject to it?
Well, this would come down to a phenomenological, this would be a huge, meaning it would be very long, drawn-out descriptions for me to go down that realm. I'm not even certain I'm up for that right now. But in what way? Go ahead and complete your sentence. In what way? What?
I didn't understand most of what you just said.
Right. Well, I thought you were saying, in what way does this convince me, is what I thought you said. And then I thought maybe he didn't say that.
No. I'm asking, in what way, through that third experience, do you believe that you are subject to this being?
Oh, right. Well, but basically, it gave me, it shored up in my reality. Let's say if you presume your reality is like a matrix or like a hologram, right? And I say that to you specifically because I've already given myself over to that idea. That the symbols and the symbols, icons, anything meaningful that you can grant over. Even an abstract meaning. Let's say you saw green things and green meant go, right? Because you were conditioned, right? You could say that was a conditioned meaning. So that would be one example, or one class of cases, one class of cases that helped convince me that I was subject to this. The other ones were symbols that appeared, numerologies, sights, sounds, events, media data, radio data. So there was real-world datum that fell into Congress and guided me. Guided me to another location, as well as media data such as radio. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could sum it up to that without going on a huge exposition about it.
Oh, holy crap! I got completely lost. Wait, I don't see how the end of what you just said was relevant to my question at all. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, like I said, it'd be very long to discuss how it is I was influenced and made subject to this third entity. Right. It would be.
Well, I guess my question. That's my question. What I'm really looking for is a definition of subject. I'm not really looking for like how you knew you were subject to it. I'm trying to ask like subject to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I felt subject to it when I basically the containment of my knowledge set became exterior to my skull, so to speak, meaning my sock was pulled inside out. And by that I mean I wasn't dealing with referencing the signifieds in my head any longer, right, in order to make sense of things, like the way people, like, okay, if I consider mom and I consider mom going here, and you can consider you could consider any number of things in your mind, right? And that gal, how to phrase this? Like, in that, meaning even my difficulty in phrasing this is difficult to describe, but essentially there was a displacement of the signifieds from within my mind outward, right? People could say you're projecting meaning all over the place. You get people that are into numerology, for example, that extract meaning from what a pragmatist would say is merely arbitrary coincidence, right? But if you attribute meaning to exterior symbols, and the multitude of ongoing symbols in Congress lead you to witnessing something supernatural, right? Then I say I was subject to being guided to said entity. I'm not certain quite. Like you, and maybe I'm still not answering your question. How did it make me feel, or how did I feel? Is that what I think you put the word "feel" in there?
Was there a question there? You cut out something else didn't question.
No, meaning I just wanted you to reiterate again because I thought you said the word "feel." Like
You're
how?
Still cutting out. I don't know.
Damn it. Well, from everything I've said, I'm not certain how you want to respond.
Yeah. That's fine. I think I got what I wanted from the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Anyway, I think I'm done too. Have a good one, guys. I mean, I'm just ending a recording on all this, so thanks for your time. Alright, so there we go. We will call this video, I don't know, I'll wait until I post it on YouTube. In the interim, let us shut down QuickTime. And thanks to everybody who listened. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Like and subscribe if you will. And yes. Out. Declan, Theos. Yeah.